My stepmom used to be my dad's affair partner and always cries about how sad and hard her life is, but I laughed when my aunt told her depression does not make you bounce up and down on the stick of a married man, and now I'm in trouble. Sorry for any mistakes, my first language is Spanish. Long story short, 2 years ago, my father left my mother to be with his mistress, whom I will call Anna. My mother had no idea about the infidelity. Anna knew my father was married. She even went to the house with him to take his things. One day, he simply told my mother that he was no longer in love with her and wanted to be happy with Anna. I was there when everything happened. Anna was depressed. She has many scars on her legs and arms. I don't go to my father's house because it makes me uncomfortable to be around them for obvious reasons. Anna is overly nice, which makes it even more uncomfortable. A few days ago, it was my grandfather's birthday, and the whole family was together, including Anna. I have an aunt who suffers from depression and other more serious issues like schizophrenia. She has tried to hurt herself many times. At one point in the night, only my father, my aunt, Anna, another aunt, and I were in the living room. For some reason, my aunt and Anna were talking about serious things, and at one point, Anna began to say that depression made her do many things in an attempt to feel fulfilled. She said she could only overcome depression when she met my father, and that he saved her. Meeting him was a key to overcoming her depression, and now she's finally happy thanks to him. I know about that, because Anna often tries to bond with me by telling me how much she suffered in her life, and how my father saved her. She has always justified herself by saying that she was depressed and in a hard place in her life before my father saved her. It always makes me feel uncomfortable, and I don't feel any empathy for her, no matter how sweet she is. Talking about how many times you've tried to unalive yourself in front of my 8-year-old sister is not something normal. Anna has always tried to paint her relationship with my father as a fairy tale that began in a different way, but she says she doesn't regret anything because her world is perfect now. At that moment, my aunt said something like, "I tried to save myself by going to a psychologist, not by jumping on the stick of a married man." She then added that depression made her want to jump off a bridge, not ruin a family. I just laughed. It was funny. My aunt may have her mind elsewhere all day, but it was crazy to see her make such a sly comment. But when my father was taking me home, Anna was crying, and he scolded me for laughing at what my aunt said, saying that no one knows everything Anna suffered. I mean, I think I know, it's all she always talks about. I didn't apologize, but now I'm wondering, was I really wrong to laugh? From my point of view, my aunt was right. Update 4 days later. Hello, some things happened over the weekend. I live with my mom, and my aunt came over and told my mom what happened. My sister is an 8-year-old girl, and she really hates Anna. Anna once tried to get along with my sister, and she told her about the time she wanted to commit suicide and how my dad saved her. After that, my sister came home asking my mother if she had ever thought about committing suicide. That's not a question an 8-year-old girl should be asking, and my sister even asked me questions about suicide after that. I don't really know exactly what else Anna said to her, but it definitely affected her as a little girl. It's not something you should talk about with a child of that age. My mother was furious, and since that day, she has forbidden my father from having my younger sister around Hannah, as she considers her a dangerous and unstable person to be around children. Since then, things have been really tense between my father and my mother, but my little sister doesn't want to visit our father, so she's fine with this. My aunt told my mother that Anna talked about it again, but this time in front of me. Apparently, my father and Anna were totally forbidden from discussing these things in front of me as well. I'm not a little kid, but that was apparently the arrangement my mother made with my father when she set boundaries for them. My aunt told her what happened that day, and I confessed to my mother that Anna and my father often talk about those suicide attempts in front of me. It's something I should have brought up earlier, but at the time, I didn't want to cause any problems and decided to just ignore it. I also told my mom that this is the reason I stopped going to my father's house. My mother got very upset with him, and the next day, she went to talk to my father. I don't know what they talked about. She just came back saying that Anna can't get close to us anymore. She told me that she can't forbid me from being near my father and that it's my decision. Anna is absolutely forbidden from being in the same place as my sister and me. My paternal grandparents agreed, as did my aunts. They were already aware of the situation with my younger sister. I haven't spoken to my father, but my cousin told me that my father argued with my grandfather. He often says that Anna is a good person and that we don't understand the pain she suffered, so I guess he's upset with all of us now for our great lack of empathy, as he always says. I don't know, but at least now I won't see them for a while. It was a boring update, but that's what happened, haha. Up in the comments. My father is only 3 years older than Anna. She isn't much younger than him or anything like that. From what Anna has told me, and she always tells this story, they met at work. She would call my father every time she tried to commit suicide, and that's how he began to help her. Anna used to see a psychologist but said she decided to stop because it didn't help her. Then she met my father, and, well, according to her, he saved her. It's disturbing to hear her talk about how she always sent messages to my father since he was her only support, her words, and how he would drop everything at home to go to her whenever she was feeling bad. A sociopath in my books. Update 24 days later. Hi, I wasn't planning on making another update, but we've had a lot of problems with Anna, too many, and I think even my father is starting to realize that she's crazy. I stopped visiting my father, and my paternal grandparents no longer allow him to bring Anna to their house, especially since I'm there a lot and my mother doesn't allow her to come near me or my sister. Anna has started behaving strangely by sending me texts. At first, she apologized but then insisted that my father misses me and my sister. I told her that my mother doesn't allow us to talk to her, and she responded by saying that since she's my father's partner, we have to get used to her being around. She then started badmouthing my mother, saying that I'm too young to realize it, but my mother is manipulating us and that it's wrong because she's preventing us from being a family. I'm young, but I'm not dumb. I didn't respond to Anna again, and I instead showed the messages to my mother, who spoke to my father about it. He had no idea about the text and apparently had an argument with Anna afterward. Now, my mother is planning to remove his last name from ours to end this situation and protect us. I don't fully understand the process, but in my country, you can go to court and have your father's surname removed, which would also take away his rights over you. Honestly, I believe neither my sister nor I would have a problem with this, but I think my mother may have mentioned it just to scare him. This is something I heard from my aunt, so I don't know how much of it is true, but apparently, my father has been staying at my grandparents' house. One night, Anna went there, knocking on the door looking for him, just to argue. She and my father started arguing, and Anna yelled at him, saying he couldn't leave her like that. The situation didn't escalate further because my grandfather kicked her out. My aunt also told me that my father confided in her that Anna has been sending him messages like, "If you leave me, I will unalive myself," and, "You can't leave me," so he's afraid to leave her, and he's afraid of her. Less than 2 days ago, I found out that my father had to leave work quickly because Anna sent him goodbye messages. Nothing serious happened to her. She just cut her arms as she usually does. My aunt said this is something Anna has always done. Even when the affair started, she would send him messages saying she was about to commit suicide so that my father would rush to her. This is something Anna also told me, but in a more romantic way, which always scared me. I have no contact with my father and I avoid him when he's at my grandpa's house. From what my aunt has told me, he doesn't know what to do because he misses us but is afraid to leave her, worried she might actually unalive herself. I feel bad for thinking this, but I'm honestly relieved to be hearing all this from afar. I'm so thankful that my mom forbade us from seeing her before all this happened. And honestly, this is his karma, so I'm not going to get involved.
My husband thinks someone else could have clapped my cheeks when I was out and about physically working to pay off his debts, so he demanded a paternity test when I was about to give birth, and now I feel like an idiot for trusting him. I want to provide some backstory to explain where I am coming from and why this situation is so hurtful for me. My husband and I come from similar backgrounds, our families live paycheck to paycheck, and not many of our relatives went to college. We both have degrees and make significantly more than the rest of our respective families. When we got married, I was already a homeowner with a small house and my own car. My husband, however, had a lot of debt, and his credit was poor. It wasn't his fault, he had significant student loans, and he frequently had to help his family members with money. He also has ADHD and had mishandled some bills. I was understanding of his situation, but I was also eager to help him become debt-free so we could have kids without such burdens over us. He was making $80K, and I was making $100K. He moved in with me, and we split expenses 50-50, except that he didn't have to pay any rent. I fully covered the mortgage and home insurance since he's not on the deed, and I also paid extra toward his debt so he could pay it off early. His car loan is in my name, and I also cover half of that. I work in IT technical support, and I had the opportunity to take a job that required 50% travel but paid a lot more. We decided together that I would take this job for a few years to significantly increase our savings and pay off a large portion of the debt. I did this job for a little over 2 years until I got pregnant, and then I took a lower paying job, now $120K, that doesn't require travel. The travel job paid more, but it was incredibly hard on me. I was traveling to remote areas of small towns where the big warehouses and data centers are located, and the job was physically demanding, lots of cable pulling, moving equipment, and working in very cold conditions. I was miserable in this job and ended up with some back problems, but it was a sacrifice for our family. When I was 8 months pregnant, my husband asked for a paternity test. It came out of nowhere, and I asked him if he didn't trust me. He said he did, but because I traveled so much, he just needed some assurance for his peace of mind. He mentioned that his family and friends had asked him how he could be so sure of this pregnancy when I had been away from home for so many nights. It really broke my heart that I had done so much for this man, didn't try to protect my assets or my money, and yet he treated me like this. I became very emotional and cried about it, so he stopped pressuring me after that. Now our son is 3 months old, and he's insisting on the paternity test again. He's put his foot down, saying I need to have the test done, and he won't sign the birth certificate otherwise. I told him his name is already on the birth certificate because we are married, and I did the paperwork before we were discharged from the hospital. He didn't realize that would be the case and is now furious, thinking I tricked him. So here I am, stuck married to a man who not only doesn't love or trust me but is also an idiot. His family is calling me and pressuring me to let him do the test. My family is offended on my behalf, but some mutual friends are saying a test is not a big deal. But it feels like such a slap in the face after all I have done for him. Am I wrong for how I am feeling? Commenter. Not the jerk, but I just don't see why you wouldn't do the test. I personally think they should always do paternity tests at the hospital after the birth. I'm not saying you cheated or that you ever would, but it happens a lot. You'd be surprised how often men find out they're raising other people's kids. Ops response. A lot of people do a lot of things, but our relationship was supposed to be built on trust, which is why I took so many financial risks for him. If he had stated from the beginning that his trust was conditional, then I wouldn't have been surprised by this. But he's okay with me paying so much for him and just trusting that he won't cheat on me or divorce me and leave me exploited, yet he doesn't have to trust me in return? How is that fair? If he had discussed any of this before I got pregnant, it would have been a different situation, and I probably wouldn't have reacted so negatively. But to bring this up when I'm about to give birth? That makes me not trust him in return. What do I gain by letting him insult me like this? Update 2 weeks later. We did the test and got the expected results. He wanted one with legal validity, not just a home test. It was a lot more expensive, and he paid for it. We had to use an agency to swap samples and maintain a chain of custody. I was surprised and bothered that he had this planned, but since he covered the high cost, and it was in my interest to have a clear, indisputable legal trail, we went ahead with it. He's been over the moon happy since I agreed to do this, and I resent his happiness. He got the STI panel done, and it came back clean too. He was surprised by my request but didn't argue about it. He said it was just a test, no big deal. He was much more weirded out about the post-nup and flat out refused to cooperate there. I gave up on that because I consulted a lawyer and realized I couldn't get much from it anyway. Whatever I've spent on him and his debt is gone, and I can't expect anything back since we are in a community property state. We argued a lot about separating finances, with him accusing me of trying to control him using money. He pointed out that we were only a couple of years away from him becoming debt-free, and if I left it all on him, it would take him 5+ years. He still doesn't understand how his lack of trust in me is comparable. He kept arguing that if he were the one with more money, he'd have spent it on me, and that for me to bring this up now makes me a bad partner. He eventually came around and agreed to contribute more to the bills after seeing how much my family had turned cold toward him. I'm close to my family, and they had loved him, but this situation has upset them. My little sister was outright rude to him, which really got to him. Being the middle child, he was frequently teased and bullied by his siblings, and my sister was the only relative who loved him like an older brother and doted on him. My words and arguments didn't move him, but seeing her ice him out did. So now he'll be paying for his own car, contributing to insurance, and covering his debt by himself. He still won't be paying rent because he simply can't afford it. I wasn't going to ask him to stop supporting his parents, and after all that, there's nothing left in his budget. I wasn't thinking about divorce when I wrote the post, and I still don't want it. But I feel like I'm falling out of love with this man. It's as if the scales have fallen from my eyes, and all his faults that I had previously minimized now stand out glaringly. My mother is fully on my side, but she has advised me not to make any quick decisions. I don't know what I'm going to do. He's trying to be helpful and a good partner, but it feels like an act. Commenter. What he's doing now is just damage control. It's definitely an act. It's ironic that being accused of cheating has made you reconsider your thoughts on the marriage. Gee, I wonder why. He doesn't like that your family is icing him out? That's almost laughable, considering he seems to have zero self-awareness and no understanding of how his actions have impacted you. Frankly, you're right to rethink your commitment to him. His very actions have shown that he doesn't have the same level of commitment toward you. What's his next outlandish and childish act going to be? Sure, the baby is his, but the underlying accusation of infidelity that came with the paternity test has left a lasting stain on your relationship. I would continue to separate all finances and get your ducks in a row. You've already spoken to a lawyer about a post-nup, so it might be worth considering drafting divorce papers. He doesn't seem to grasp the almost irreparable damage he has caused to the marriage. Again, zero self-awareness. The key question you need to ask yourself is whether you can live with him. Setting aside all the other red flags, can you live with the fact that he doesn't trust you? He may claim that he does, but that's clearly not true. He wouldn't have insisted on a paternity test if he did. Now, factor in all the other red flags and ask yourself, can you live with this? Can you raise your child in a household where one partner doesn't pull his weight and doesn't trust the other? As your mom said, don't make any hasty decisions, but it sounds like you already have a sense of where this is headed. Don't stay in a relationship that doesn't make you happy. It's not healthy for you or your child. Some creepy old guy always blocks the way into work to force women to talk to him, and it finally happened to me, so I found out where he works and now I'm finna force him to lose his job. So, there's this guy, 50-ish M, who works at a different company in the same business building as mine. Whenever a woman happens to be arriving at a doorway at the same time as him, he blocks the doorway by leaning against one side and extending his arm across it. He never says anything, just does this eye contact smile thing for maybe 3 seconds, and then allows us to go through. To be clear, he's forcing you to duck under his armpit to get through. Today, it was finally my turn. I got to the main building door right after him. Instead of holding it open so it didn't close in my face like most people do, he just held it open and stood there with a smug smile. It made me nervous, so I said, Can I please enter the building? I need to clock in. He responded with a sarcastic wow, geez, fine, sorry before stepping aside, still holding the door open for me. I then said, stop doing that, we all hate it, and just went in. As soon as I turned the corner from the lobby, I half ran to the stairwell so I wouldn't have to share the elevator with him. I don't even know what firm he works for. According to my closest coworker, HR won't do anything because he's not our employee. Edit. A male colleague helped us figure out which company he works for by following him up the elevator when he was coming back from lunch. It turns out it's a law office on a higher floor. Another coworker took one of your suggestions and wrote an email to the building's management office. I went to my department manager and carefully asked if, in a situation like this, I should report it to our own HR. He said it should at least be on record, even if it's hard to prove, which made me give him the fry eyes, IYKYK. But I went back, typed up an email, and sent it, ceasing him and other women that I've specifically seen or heard deal with this guy. If he thought I was being hypothetical, now he knows I wasn't. The colleague who followed him to the law office joked that we should hand draw flyers of him to warn people and put them in the elevators. Update 2 days later. Yesterday was a long day for me. I came in early to 1, make up for lost time spent dealing with this BS, and 2, to avoid the noid. However, someone ran into him in the afternoon and went straight to our manager, saying, he's still doing it. So, as far as yesterday goes, not much has changed. It's only been a day. I got asked, who does he look like? More than once, so I asked around which celebrity we thought he most resembles. We all agreed he looks like the jump to conclusions guy from the movie Office Space. It's true, except he's a lot taller, over 6 feet at least. Thank you so much for all your support and suggestions. I've never been advised about pepper spray so much. I do carry it, but the one time I had to use it, it got in my eyes too, so it's become more of a last resort tool. I told everyone in the bullpen about whipping out our phones and taking a picture or video, including those who might notice from a distance. In the moment, I think a lot of us kind of freeze up. I did, so having a plan of action ahead of time really helps. I took someone's suggestion about wearing huge headphones. The theory is that because people who wear those are in their own little world, it's acceptable to show no concern, which makes attention seekers feel less significant. So I wore mine today and arrived at my normal time, but no one was hanging around the main entrance. I'm not sure if that's because of the email or not. It's probably too early to hear of any official steps being taken. But I did feel kind of young and cool on the light rail. Way more comfortable than my AirPods. Several folks asked about what I wrote in the email, so here's a copy-paste of it, with identifying details omitted or changed. I'll post another update when more happens, hopefully today. I keep rereading the email, and my stomach keeps flipping over and over like I'm a kid about to get in huge trouble, vomit face emoji. 2. HR department at the law offices of blank and blank. I'm writing on behalf of myself and several employees at call center company, located on the 3rd floor of our shared building, to inform you about some workplace harassment we have been experiencing. For several weeks now, an employee at your firm has been intentionally intimidating women by interrupting their path of travel to and from our offices by blocking the doorway with his body in order to force an interaction. He will not move aside until some kind of verbal exchange has happened. He only does this with women, as far as we've observed and documented, which makes us inclined to call this intimate harassment. This behavior is of course unacceptable. This individual creates a very uncomfortable work environment, despite being in different organizations on different floors. He will often be the first interaction of the day, as he seems to linger around the main building lobby and entrance in the mornings. He will also do this with the elevator doors by stalling them from closing or blocking access to the button panel. This has been setting a tone that interferes with having a secure working experience. Many of us have made multiple attempts to address the issue with this person directly, including myself, who told him firmly that we do not like it when he does this. We are requesting that your firm take immediate action to investigate and address this issue. This has already been discussed with our department manager and HR department, and they are looking forward to hearing from yours. I have CC'd them on this email, as well as the XYZ Plaza building manager. It is fair to assume that with 6 different organizations sharing the same building, our employees are not the only ones experiencing this. Please inform us when call center company can expect to see the results of your investigation, and what measures will be taken to ensure that this type of behavior does not happen again in the future. We hope that this issue can be resolved quickly, and that appropriate actions will be taken to ensure that all employees working in XYZ Plaza feel safe and respected as we all make our way to and from our offices. Sincerely with gratitude, Up. Okay, I have to get back to work. I will update later on. Update 6 days later. Oh boy, I've never gotten this much traffic from a post before. Mostly, it's been positive, with all the support, suggestions, input, and reminders I've received over the last several days. So many comments have helped me turn my anger into power. I've been writing a hi from them and from that email. I've never done anything like that before, and I'm so appreciative of the support and validation that I did the right thing. Here's how the week has been going. Monday, no one saw the Noid, which is what I've been calling him. I arrived 15 minutes early just in case. I was afraid he would confront me, angry because he'd gotten in trouble. But no, the lobby was empty, and I was the first person to arrive at the office that day. Later, when I was in the break room, a colleague who sits in the bullpen near me said, "This is the first time in months I haven't had to deal with him in some way or another." Tuesday, still no Noid sightings. I asked around. I haven't even seen his car in the lot. Did he get fired? It was super busy that day, and I was pretty much glued to my desk, so I didn't have time to meet with my manager or do anything besides shooting him a quick, "Hey, any response?" via Teams before I left for the day. I didn't want to be pushy, but I really wanted to know. Yesterday, Wednesday, mid-morning, a few women, including myself, were asked to meet with HR separately. I learned that the law offices of blank and blank's HR rep emailed a response to my email directly to them and my manager on Monday, without CCing me on it, which made me feel some kind of way, but whatever. The Noid is not an attorney but a paralegal, and he is on voluntary leave for the week. I asked if the response email could be forwarded to me, but I was told that policy prevents HR from disclosing any disciplinary actions that might have been taken against him. Then I had to write a short statement describing my specific encounter. I hate how, in words, it doesn't look like a big deal, but I was assured that it is. A bunch of us went out for cocktails after work, and I got to hear what others wrote in their statements, like how he sometimes followed them to their cars trying to talk to them, or how he would stand in the elevator doors, preventing them from closing until they said please. EU, just EU. Today, Thursday, I just got here, and still no Noid. We are all hungry to know what happened, if he got fired, transferred, or something else. No one has been told anything except that he chose to take some days off. Maybe this is the law office protecting themselves, I don't know. The thing I'm most afraid of is if he comes back, will he be hostile or retaliate in some way, and I'll have to be brave again and report it. I wish we had a spy in their office. I'm sorry I don't have more for you. It's kind of anticlimactic, I know. I promise that if I find out what actually happened to him, I will let you all know. Or if he reappears, I'll loop you all in. Edit. I'm getting a frame for that email for my apartment. Up in the comments. We are all hungry to know what happened. I think I mentioned in the original post that another coworker emailed the management at the law office, but she wasn't one of the people who joined us for drinks. I don't know if or when she had her HR meeting. I don't want to ask either, because she's probably just as on edge as I am, and who knows how much worse her encounters were. The fact that she was fed up enough to communicate with them directly is heavy. I've been obsessively ruminating on this, and here are my guesses. 1. Between my email, hers, and our male coworker following him to see where he worked, they must have gotten a pretty good description and identified him, or his identity was verified from the info in the emails. 2. He does this to women in his own office, and someone in HR immediately knew who we were referring to. Maybe he's even been reported before but had plausible deniability. Also insane how I'm learning all these legal terms, lol. I'm seriously considering going back to school and getting a law degree at 50, how insane is that? 3. No one was identified, but maybe a company-wide reminder went out about reporting intimate harassment. At my job, we have to do video trainings on stuff like this every year or so maybe they had a meeting or sent a mass email. 4. This isn't the case, but for a couple of days, I was really worried. What if the Noid was their HR rep, and he was like, "Oh crap," and just noped right out of town?
My girlfriend has no goals or aspirations and will be homeless without me, but I need to prioritize my future. Now she is begging me to give her 2 months to change and not break up with her. I, 24M, met a girl, 22F, in a community college class when I was 20. We came from very different backgrounds. I was middle class, trying to find a cheaper way to attend college, while she was living in near poverty, attending school because her parents were forcing her to, and threatening to kick her out otherwise. She dropped out about a year into her schooling while I continued and finished. During her first year, we formed a relationship, and she more or less moved into my apartment. Her relationship with her parents is pretty much non-existent, and she has little to no outside friends besides 1 or 2 women she knew from high school, who, in my opinion, are deadbeats. I make around $80K a year, so we live relatively comfortably, but there's still some strain on finances. I can't say exactly when I started losing feelings, but the fact that she refuses to work, will not cook, wants to eat out every day, does not want to go to school, and continuously wants to buy and spend money on clothes and other things, just slowly started grating on me more and more. I work in a female-dominated workplace, and seeing, having conversations with, and interacting with coworkers who have so much going for them, with fun hobbies and aspirations, makes it all the worse when your girlfriend is chronically online, spending 7 hours a day doom scrolling through Instagram or TikTok reels, and thinks that having bedroom intimacy is all she needs to do on her end. Our relationship isn't bad, we have fights every now and then like an average couple, and we have an active bedroom life, but that's pretty much it. From her perspective, if I broke up with her, it would seem to come out of nowhere, but I'm pretty much done, and I know I could move on quickly without any regrets, as harsh as that sounds. The problem is that she has no job, no finances, almost no friends, and no family support system. I'm not a monster, I don't want to make someone virtually homeless, but I also don't want to be stuck with someone who has nothing going for them. I don't know what to do. Edit. She wasn't as bad when we were still in school, she at least helped cook and had some aspirations to be a nurse. But I guess as she started getting comfortable, her habits built up more and more until it got to this point. This wouldn't have been a 4-year relationship if it had started this way. She only leaves the apartment when I take her to get food, otherwise, she either sleeps or is on her phone. If she were a toxic or bad partner, I wouldn't have too much trouble ending it, but she's fairly nice, just very lazy. Update 1 day later. For starters, I want to thank everyone for all the advice I received on the last thread. It helped me formulate how I would go about handling this. When I made that post, I was having an extremely bad day, and I didn't expect it to blow up like it did, so I don't think I was able to give her a fair defense. When I mentioned that she came from poverty, I should have clarified that her father is a laborer, and her mother lives a lifestyle similar to how she lives now. Their home is maybe 1,100 square feet and located in a terrible part of town. Given her father's past ultimatum, I don't think he would take her back, especially since she hasn't been home in years. Yes, I have talked to her about this, maybe 3 times since January. I've tried gently suggesting that it would be nice if she went out more, or found a hobby at the very least, and I've also flat out told her that she was wasting away on her phone and she needed to get a job or go back to school. Each time, she either changed the subject, made it a joke, or followed through for a couple of days before reverting to her usual behavior. She is a kind partner who asks me about my day, always tries to make me laugh or lighten the mood when I get annoyed, and generally shows a lot of affection. This makes me feel terrible because none of that works anymore, and I just see her as another person. Now for the confrontation. Last night, when we were both getting ready for bed, I didn't take my clothes off. Instead, I stood there and told her we needed to talk. At first, she was just smiling and jumping up and down on the bed on her knees, thinking I wasn't as serious as I was. But eventually, she was able to read the mood. I told her that something wasn't feeling right anymore, that I've tried to make this work and be patient with her for the past few years, but I didn't know how much more time I was willing to spend waiting for her to get a job, go back to school, or just get a hobby, anything. I told her that it annoyed and grated on me that she didn't seem to care about herself, and that I hated that she had no goals or aspirations. This was probably the first time in a long time that she was as attentive as ever during a conversation. She agreed with everything I was saying, even offering suggestions on where she could apply for jobs, what courses were starting to interest her, and even said I could oversee her as she submitted applications online to make sure she wasn't lying. In her mind, it seemed like I was still willing to make this work, and a part of me believed that this might finally be the moment she would change. So it made the next part even harder for both of us. At first, I told her I didn't love her the same way anymore, which slowly, but eventually, led to me saying I didn't feel anything at all about this relationship and was jaded. I was tired, and I wanted a fresh start with someone who was more goal-oriented and wanted something more out of life. When she realized what I was getting at, she started to cry and asked why I didn't mention this sooner. I told her that I had always asked her to cook, to go out with me to try something new, or just to go back to school, even offering to pay for her classes, anything. She said she understood that part, but was upset that I hadn't told her it was leading to me losing interest in her, because from her perspective, it seemed as if I still loved her just the same. She began apologizing, saying she wasn't in the right mental state, and that nothing was motivating her. She admitted that she genuinely had no interest in any hobbies, the only thing she liked was spending time with me, which was all she looked forward to each day when I came home. None of this really affected my emotions, other than making me feel uncomfortable, so I tried to continue by saying that I thought her lifestyle might be better suited with someone else. But she immediately cut me off and became more panicked. She started apologizing again for what she had done, and said she would be a better girlfriend. She promised to go with me wherever I wanted to go the next day, and to look for courses in August that she could start. She said she didn't want to lose me because she had nothing else in her life, and absolutely hated that I had stopped loving her. There were so many tears and so much snot that I said we would have this conversation again when she calmed down, which we eventually did an hour or so later. She pleaded for 2 months to make a change, and begged for another chance, repeatedly promising that she would change. Again, she listed all the places she would apply to, and vowed to be a better partner. I never wanted to make her homeless, so this seemed like a good compromise, even though I still had my doubts. I then reaffirmed that I wanted to see other people, but she was much more adamant about fixing the relationship than about the aspirations issue. She asked me repeatedly to give her a month to try to make the relationship work, and asked again and again what she could do to make me love her again, insisting that she didn't want me to hate her. She said the worst part of it all was that the only person she had was just done with her. It seemed as if she was about to break down again, so I said, okay, we'll see how the relationship is in a month. In my mind, if I was allowing her 2 months to get back on her feet, then by the end of the first month, she would already be ready to move on. I also didn't want her to suffer a complete mental breakdown while I was still living with her, so giving her a month to try to fix the relationship would give her enough time to accept things. I slept on the couch last night, and will probably continue doing so for a while. She came out around 3 a.m. wanting to talk some more, but I told her I was exhausted, and that we would talk tomorrow. She then slept on the floor beside me for the rest of the night, apologizing again. When I told her to stop, she quietly said okay, and sobbed a bit under her blanket. But that's everything that has happened so far. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I regret nothing, and feel much better having let everything out. I don't know how this situation will be in 2 months, but I was firm that it was the deadline. This post will probably get buried, so I likely won't do another update, as I don't think anyone will care about this in a week or a month. However, I will definitely private message those of you who have been helping me through this to let you know how it turns out, or to anyone who just wants to be updated. But yeah, thanks. Update 6 days later. Hey all, it's been about a week since my last post, and I thought I'd give an update. A lot has happened, including the explosion of my first update thread. I have over 50 plus DMs asking for an update, so instead of copying and pasting replies, I'll do another one here. I find it easier to write than to speak in many situations, so this has been a great way to help me make decisions and clear my head. Writing everything down has helped tremendously, and I will continue to do so until this is all over, after which I'll nuke everything. After the night of the confrontation, we didn't really speak much at home, and things were dry and awkward for a day or two. However, I've been told I'm a workaholic by nature, so it was easy for me to stay at the hospital as a distraction. During that time, she did start cooking again. We weren't in the mood to go out to eat together. Eventually, though, I sat down with her after she asked for a more thorough conversation about why I felt our relationship was failing. She promised not to cry or get upset, but wanted me to be 100% upfront so she could better understand, stating she wanted to try everything to fix this. I was really apprehensive about this, and I can't fully explain why, but given that we've been together for 4 years, I wanted to at least make an effort out of respect, even though a large part of me was angry for even doing so, as I feel I've never received the same effort from her. There have been many different opinions in response to my last update. The main ones are, kick her out immediately and leave before it gets worse, try to find a way to fix our relationship, or end the relationship altogether but continue living with her, which would probably lead to her becoming absolutely neurotic. If I was going to let her stay for 2 months, I definitely would not be dealing with that. I took into consideration all these main advice discussions and read through almost every reply, even the most assumptive, bizarre, and downright unhinged Redditor takes. More importantly, I was heavily influenced by those who have shared with me their past stories, which either led to them being stuck in loveless relationships for years, or eventually being able to overcome their problems and have an even stronger connection. Thank you again for your private messages. I read through many of your stories. Now for our conversation. She mentioned that she saw something on TikTok where couples put a phone on the table with a timer and take turns airing what makes them upset. She wanted to do something similar. I said that was a dumb idea, and that if we were going to talk about our problems, it would be better if there were no time limit. She eventually agreed and said I could go first, asking me when I completely lost my love for her. As I said before, it wasn't due to one specific action, but rather a grating feeling that got worse and worse until it reached this point, and I told her that. So she then asked when I felt the most angry. I told her it would take some time for me to think, and she said that was fine. After a few minutes, something came to mind. I couldn't find the right words at first, but eventually, it just started to come out. I told her that the worst time was when I first started working at the hospital. To keep it short, the tempo was brutal. It was constant work with little to no downtime, as I was constantly learning new things that school had never taught me, while being expected to handle everything like a professional. It was without a doubt the most stressed I've ever been, and I feel like other RNs can relate. That year hardened my mindset, that hard work does pay off if you have the drive and passion. I told her that was when I started losing feelings the fastest, seeing her at home doing absolutely nothing. Coming home to no food made, no job, no learning, just her being completely glued to the internet with nothing to show for it. I said it made me even more upset when I gave her suggestions for jobs with pretty easy schedules, or encouraged her to find a new interest in school that would pan out better than last time, only to be rejected at every attempt. I told her flat out that it disgusted me. She asked why I didn't make this a bigger issue at the time, and said I should have communicated this to her, but I told her that some things shouldn't have to be said. I shouldn't have to remind her to take care of herself, eat, or do something other than mindlessly scrolling on her phone for hours every day. I also told her that after coming home from the hospital on more stressful days, the last thing I wanted was to spend my time begging my girlfriend to do something productive. So, I held my tongue and settled because she was still nice and caring. I had no other reasons to end it, and from then on, the resentment grew worse. It was around this point that I became more mean, which I now regret, but I'll still include it as I have everything else. I told her that when she dropped nursing, I was upset because I felt she was more than capable of doing what I had done. But after spending more time in the relationship and getting to know her better, I realized that, given the type of person she was, there was no way she could have ever finished. That's why I suggested easier and more laid-back jobs, less demanding majors in school, or even just cooking or finding an interesting hobby. At that point, I would have appreciated anything. Still, she chose to do nothing for years. It's just the type of person she is, which is why I eventually felt done with her romantically. She asked me if I hated her, and I said I didn't know. I told her she was very loving and kind, but I hated how she had handled her life up to this point. I said I felt no ill will toward her after airing everything out, but I also felt nothing else. I just felt done and ready to move on. Throughout this conversation, we maintained eye contact, and there were times it seemed like she might break, but as she said, she remained as calm as she could while I said what I had to say. I told her I was done, and that she could say her piece now, but she asked if we could continue the conversation later, and then locked herself in our room for the rest of the day. The next day, we sat down again and finished the conversation. She told me that she thinks she's depressed, saying that she didn't feel sad before that night, but just had no motivation to do anything. I had received a few messages suggesting I ask her to get tested for ADHD, but when I brought it up, she was very adamant that it wasn't something she felt comfortable with. I knew she didn't like needles or going to the hospital in general, but her flat-out refusal to get tested for disorders when I told her it wasn't at all like a regular hospital visit surprised me. She asked if I would give her another chance if she were able to change her behavior. I said I didn't know, as I felt nothing right now, and wasn't sure if her changing would bring any feelings back, especially since it took reaching my breaking point to get here. She asked if there was any compromise, and I told her again that if, in a month, I felt there was enough reason to stay together, I would, but there was no guarantee that my feelings would return. However, I would match any effort she put in. She was frustrated by my answer, but I told her that's how it would be. She then gave me a piece of paper she had been working on the night before, which listed hobbies and interests she wanted to explore. The two major ones were photography and cooking again. She told me that she was looking into these hobbies, and also showed me her phone as proof that she was submitting applications on Indeed and Glassdoor for some entry-level positions she might get hired for. I told her that if she could show enough passion or interest in these hobbies, I wouldn't care about her working, just anything to improve herself. But if she didn't pursue anything at all, then it would be best to look for a new job to help her when she moves out. I've also been asked in private messages if I have any personal friends to talk to. There are two female co-workers I confide in, given how many hours we work together at the hospital, and whom I completely trust because, in my opinion, they are extremely grounded. They both said I would eventually get love-bombed and that things would revert to how they were before, and that I needed to stand firm with moving on. They're very helpful friends who have even offered to let me stay over for a few nights, reasoning that I would fall for her manipulation if I continued being anywhere near her, in their own words. But it didn't feel right since I'm still technically in a relationship, though I said I would consider it if the situation worsened. However, I find them grounded, so I always try to take their advice to heart. Despite numerous messages from you all, both privately and openly, telling me that this will be a mistake, I want to make the attempt to give this one last try. Although I feel heavily closed off and guarded, and still feel indifferent about our current situation, many of you have told me this can eventually change with enough work from both parties. I have also taken the advice of those suggesting I cut off bedroom intimacy, which was my intention from the start anyway, by continuing to sleep in the living room. But each day, she has been sleeping on the floor right below me, even when I tell her I'd rather be alone with my thoughts. She keeps telling me this is something she won't accept. But that's everything so far. The next update will probably be at the 1-month mark, as there's nothing else I feel I need to say for now. I'm just waiting to see if things can get better now that we're somewhat working on this.
My sister is upset that I'm willing to babysit my friend's baby but refuse to look after her nightmare child. I'm a 23-year-old child-free woman, and my sister is 30 with a 4-year-old son. She's a single mom, her ex-husband is not in the picture and has no contact with her or the child. I'll get straight to the point, that kid is a nightmare to be around. It's not his fault, it's my sister's fault. He clearly has behavioral and mental health disorders, even at his young age. However, my sister is very ableist and refuses to accept that her son has problems. The kid goes into a bloody rage whenever something doesn't go his way, screams and cries when he's overwhelmed, and has meltdowns due to certain sounds and textures. Like I said, I don't blame the kid for these issues, but my sister's refusal to get him treatment or help makes the kid a nightmare to be around. As a result, I don't babysit him when my sister asks, or more like demands, that I do so. This causes a lot of fights between us and our family. I have a friend, a 23-year-old man, who's married to a wonderful 22-year-old woman, and they have a baby boy who just turned 1. Yes, they got married and had him young, but it's not my place to judge them. This past weekend, they asked me to babysit for them, and I agreed for a few reasons. Their child is calm, well-behaved, and generally a good toddler to be around. I love babysitting him. Also, they asked me nicely and understood that I might say no because I'm child-free. They were polite in their request. One thing about me is that if you ask me to do something politely, even if it's something I wouldn't usually agree to, I'd probably do it because you were nice and polite. So, for these reasons, I happily agreed to babysit the boy. My sister also asked me to babysit her son that day so she could have a day to herself, but I refused and told her I was already babysitting for my friends. She was pissed, to say the least. She made a few comments about how I was a jerk and not a good sister, but I thought she had dropped it after that. This past weekend, while I was watching the baby, my sister started banging on my door. I looked through the window and saw that she had her kid in a care bag with her, and I knew she was trying to drop him off and make me babysit. She was banging on the door, yelling at me, calling me heartless and a baby hater, while I was holding a baby, ironically, and telling me that I'd better open up and do my sisterly duties. I put the baby in a different room to keep him from getting scared by the noise and told my sister through the window to leave or I would call the cops. She cursed for a solid 5 minutes before she finally left. I had the whole thing recorded on my doorbell camera and sent it to the family group chat. Surprisingly, my whole family is on my sister's side. She keeps arguing with me about how I'd rather babysit a child not even related to me than my nephew. I reminded her that her kid is a nightmare to be around, but she keeps insisting that you help out for family. My sister has been cold since then and keeps sending me text messages trying to provoke me into arguing with her more. She's also started saying some pretty ableist and nasty things about my friend's wife. My friend's wife is on the spectrum and has BPD, and my sister keeps saying she should have been sterilized and never should have passed her issues on to her child. By the way, her child has shown none of the signs that autistic infants usually do, so I have no idea what my sister is talking about. I will admit that I do feel a bit guilty because I never considered babysitting my nephew, but I jumped at the opportunity to babysit my friend's child. My sister, dad, 66M, mom, 64F, and brother, 33M, are all calling me a jerk and saying that I'm just using the child-free label to avoid family responsibility. I need advice on how to get my family to see my perspective on this. How can I explain to them that the issue is the idea of babysitting, but the behavior of the child? Commenter. Why doesn't your brother or other family members babysit him? Op's response. In the words of my family, he already has his own family responsibilities, you have none. Yes, that's pretty much always their response when I ask why my brother can't babysit the kid. My brother also knows deep down that the kid is a nightmare, even though he tries to ignore it, just like my sister and parents do. His kids also don't like spending time with her son because he's had violent meltdowns and has hurt them before. The kids avoid him like the plague. I don't blame any of the kids in that situation. My sister's son clearly has behavioral and/or mental issues that cause him to react violently to overstimulation, which is not his fault. He needs help so he can develop ways to control his meltdowns and keep his emotions in check. My brother's kids, while mature for their age, are still children and don't fully understand why he acts the way he does, so they harbor resentment and dislike toward him. I feel bad for all the kids involved, nobody is winning. Update 3 days later. So, things have really hit the fan. My original post was about 3 days ago, and ever since that post, my sister's behavior has escalated. I tried to talk to her about getting help for my nephew, but she kept screaming at me every time I brought it up. She used a lot of derogatory terms towards people with mental illnesses and disabilities, terms I won't repeat here. That wasn't the only escalation. She started coming to my door several times a day, starting 2 days ago, the day after I made my original post. She banged on my door, screamed, cried, cursed, the works. She brought my nephew each time, and he always looked so confused and defeated. He was too tired to react or have a meltdown like he normally does around loud noises, and it broke my heart to see that on my doorbell camera. I wasn't at my house, I was staying with my friend and his wife. I took the advice of a commenter who suggested putting some physical distance between me and my sister. They said I was welcome to stay as long as I wanted, as long as I helped out with some house chores and childcare while I was there, which I thought was more than fair. So, I'm currently staying in their guest room. I'm still with them, even though my sister isn't much of a problem anymore. Many will be glad to know that my sister won't have parental rights over my nephew soon. She dropped him off at a safe haven site in the middle of the night, and I only found out via phone call at 2 in the morning. My nephew is currently with my parents. Social services placed him with them, and he's said to have mandatory therapy. In my state, not sure if it's different in others, if a child is abandoned in any way, safe haven or not, a physical and mental health examination is conducted. Other than being a little underweight, my nephew was physically healthy. He wasn't being physically abused, as some people were worried about. However, it was clear he needed mental health support, so he'll be starting therapy sessions soon, as mandated by a caseworker. We are not looking for my sister. After she dropped off her son, she left. She had quit her job a few weeks back, sold her car, and even sold her house a few weeks ago. She had been renting a place, so this was clearly planned. In my personal opinion, she intended to abandon her son the day I was babysitting my friend's baby, which is why she had such a nuclear reaction. She did leave a note, saying she couldn't do it anymore, that she met someone, and that she doesn't want to be a mom to my nephew anymore. In her note, she said she deserves a normal kid, not a burden like my nephew. I seriously hope my sister doesn't have any more kids with this mystery person she mentioned, but it seems like she's running off to start a new life and family. She still has 30 days to reclaim rights over my nephew, but it doesn't look like she'll do that. Time will tell. As I mentioned, I'm still staying with my friends because I was worried my sister would do something. My parents and brother have also been blowing up my phone and coming to my house, switching between apologies and blaming me for this. They think that maybe if I had babysat that day, she wouldn't have done this, but I believe she wanted me to babysit so she could go through with it. I'm not mad at them for blaming me. I understand that my sister is still their family, and they're rightfully in shock and want someone to blame. They're human, and I know people can be cruel sometimes while going through shock and grief. So, yeah, that's life right now. I'm currently sitting on the couch with my friend's baby while my friend is at work and his wife does a quick grocery run. She was going to take the baby with her, but I insisted on watching him so she wouldn't have to deal with the car seat in the very stormy weather we have in our area right now. This update is all over the place, and I feel like I'm rambling. There's still a lot of unknowns regarding my sister and nephew, but for now, this is the update. I don't know if I'll post more about this situation. My friend's wife is telling me I should relax and try not to think about anything related to this until I'm more level-headed, but I don't think that's possible. Update to 11 days later. My sister abandoned her 5-year-old son a little less than 2 weeks ago and fled. The police are looking for her, but she hasn't been found yet. My nephew is with my parents and is in therapy. When this first happened, my parents were quick to blame me because I had refused to babysit him in the past and the weekend before my sister ultimately abandoned him. They think that if I had babysat him that day, she wouldn't have fled. I've been staying with my friends since then, and, oh my god, it's so chill here. They're young parents with a baby, and yet it's calm here. Everyone is happy, they talk things out when there are issues, and they work together. I've met both sets of my friends' parents, and they're nice and polite. Obviously, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I've seen some bickering, and they always find a way to resolve it. Growing up, my parents always argued a lot. My siblings were often loud and cruel to each other, and there always had to be someone to blame. If you were the one blamed, you were insulted and shunned for a while, then they would apologize. You were always expected to forgive and forget. My parents are now trying to apologize to me about their blowout over my sister, and I can understand their initial feelings. I'm willing to forgive, but I know my family will also expect me to forget, and I can't forget. I don't think I can forget this whole situation. So, I'm wondering if I would be wrong if I chose to forgive them but refuse to forget this whole thing? Commenter. Your parents are looking for a free babysitter. They're waiting for an opportunity to leave the poor boy with you and claim that he's your responsibility now. Then they'll use the argument that if you had just babysat him like your sister demanded, she wouldn't have abandoned her son. Don't get sucked back in. Tell them that you don't exist to be blamed and that they should try to raise this kid better than they raised his mother. My fiancé is a people pleaser and won't tell his best friend to stop harassing me for no reason, so now I might have to call off the wedding for good reason since he wants to keep everyone else pleased but me. My fiancé has the biggest heart. He would literally give you the shirt, pants, and hat off his body if you ask for it. He's a recovering people pleaser, and I understand because I also used to be a people pleaser. We've been together for over 5 years. A few months ago, I started noticing his best friend making some not so nice comments towards me. I'm trying to be vague, but let's just say this friend is the type to figure out who in the room would be most affected by being picked on, and then he picks and picks and picks on them until they can't take it anymore. Nobody ever really holds him accountable for this, and unfortunately, I have somehow become his favorite target. I tried to put up with these comments, but they started getting really elaborate. The friend would make up lies about me, claiming I said things I never did. He once called me in front of all our friends, my fiancé included, just to yell, "You're a bad friend," into the phone and then hung up. There's so much more to it that I can't share because I'm trying to remain somewhat anonymous. It started affecting me in my mental health, and I ended up having a full breakdown where I told my fiancé how much this was all starting to hurt me. The first time I broke down over this, my fiancé said he would talk to his friend about messing with me less. He then told me his friend was sorry and that he'd be keeping an ear out for any other comments, promising to jump to my defense if it happened again. A few weeks later, the friend provoked a very specific childhood trauma for me, and I had a second breakdown in front of my fiancé. He then admitted that his friend didn't actually apologize. Instead, he said he was sorry I was too sensitive to understand his humor. At that point, I told my fiancé that my friendship with this person was over, and that I wanted zero contact from here on out, even if it meant missing out on events and parties that I'd otherwise love to attend. He agreed with me that all of this is being done with the intention of getting a rise out of me, and that even if we try to get through to this friend, he's so diabolical that we could never fully trust him not to treat me at least a little bit poorly. My fiancé kept asking if this meant he had to quit the project they're working on. I told him I would never tell him he had to, because I know how much it means to him, but in all honesty, the fact that this person is treating me so poorly that I'm having physical stress reactions, and that isn't enough for him to want to cut this person off, does hurt a lot. The fact that it isn't a deal breaker for him is probably always going to sting a little. He's not confrontational at all, and I always knew that, but it's not about confrontation. It's about standing in my corner, and I can't spend the rest of my life with someone who isn't in my corner. This friend is getting married to my best friend in a few months, and we're both supposed to be in the wedding, but I really have no clue how to handle it. I get a literal knot in my stomach anytime his name is even mentioned now. I've seen this friend one time since all of this came to a head, and he was so over-the-top nice to me that it came off as arrogant. I had the second breakdown a few days afterward, because I realized I might spend the rest of my life on edge and on guard anytime this person is even somewhat in my vicinity, even if they aren't actively messing with me. I don't know how to come to terms with the fact that my fiancé was willing to lie to me on his crappy friend's behalf, but he's not willing to stand in my corner against him. I think it'll always hurt. This guy was supposed to be the best man in our wedding, and as a result, we haven't been talking much about wedding plans. I think if my fiancé is still planning on having this friend in our wedding, I may have to call it off for my own sanity, and that sucks so bad. This is eating me alive. I love my fiancé so much. I love his big heart and the way he loves with all of it. But he loves some truly wretched people, and I don't know if he'll enforce any boundaries with those people before the lack of boundaries becomes too much for me to handle. I'm just hurt and hurting. I just want whatever outcome to play out so I can stop feeling so guilty and awful all the time. Update 1 month later. Never thought I'd actually update this account out of sheer embarrassment, but I wanted to share this for those who encouraged me to put myself first. I want you all to know my partner absolutely came through and protected me in this. We spent all the time since my last post up until last week communicating, trying to find a resolution, and walking through how it got this bad. He took a lot of accountability for that. This is not a case of me giving in. He fully understands that this only got so bad because it was never handled correctly, and he had a major hand in that. There were so many more layers to this than a Reddit post ever could have conveyed. The bottom line is that we are closer than ever, and after a lot of talking, we decided on my partner sending a firm but not unkind message to his friend, explaining the behaviors, explaining that they were hurting his partner, and that it needed to stop. He offered to write up the first draft, and we could go over it together to perfect it. Read it. Please know that the first draft my partner wrote was so spot on, exactly what I needed to read, that it instantly shifted us into us versus the problem mode after we'd been stuck butting heads for weeks. He laid everything out so clearly and in ways we hadn't discussed before, so I know it came from him. We had to tone down a lot of the big emotions, but we truly gave the message its best shot at addressing the situation without being hostile. We knew the response would be bad no matter what, but I don't think anything could have prepared us for what happened. This man went full scorched earth and blew up everything almost immediately. He insulted my partner, claimed the events didn't happen the way I described, and demanded they meet up alone with a mediator. He even threatened to reach out to my partner's parents to fill them in, which was probably the moment we stopped taking his responses seriously. We're all almost in our 30s, and he threatened it not just once, but twice. We actually had to call my partner's parents to warn them that he might show up at their place later this week, and not to open the door. There's still a good chance he'll attempt it. We stayed respectful throughout all of this, which I feel good about. We didn't stoop to his level, didn't insult anyone, and simply asked for basic human respect, yet somehow it still blew up spectacularly. In the end, both of us received a massive wall of text from my, now ex, best friend, fully backing up her man and telling her side of the story, which is so insanely far from what actually happened that all I can do is laugh. We've been shifting from crying, to being dumbstruck, to just straight up laughing at the absurdity. I went into this thinking she was brainwashed, but it turns out I was wrong. They're a perfect match. I wish them all the best. I'm sending them one last message to set the record straight, which my partner and I decided together was the best approach apart from just ghosting, before moving on from this entirely. I'm going to make it very clear that this is done. Zero contact indefinitely, and I will never look back. My partner and I both deserve much better friends, and we both see that so clearly now. I'm so glad I learned my friend's true colors before we dropped $800 on a hotel for their wedding. Thank you to everyone who was kind. Not only did I put myself first in the end, but my partner did too. We're going to take this week in stride, process it all, grieve the friendships we once thought were forever, and at the end of the week, we have a conveniently timed vacation at my partner's family cottage. I think we're going to come out of this stronger because we already feel it. Again, thank you to those who had something productive to say. I've made my peace with all the rest. I guess if the guy does something else outlandish, maybe I'll update, but for now, this chapter is closed, and I'm so ready for it to start collecting dust. Commenter. I'm extremely sorry this all happened, but I'm also happy that your partner gave you his full support here. As for the ex-best friend, I've seen this before, and I'll bring it up just in case it's needed. Sometimes victims of abusive manipulators end up seemingly doing a 180 to their normal behavior and supporting their abusers against everyone else. This doesn't mean they are evil themselves, but rather that they have been brainwashed. Your fiancé had you to talk to and explain how crappy his ex-best friend is. Your friend has no one close enough, apart from spending 24 hours per day with the psycho, and you don't know what crap he's feeding her, with the end goal of cutting her off from any loving friends, so that she only has him, and he can abuse her freely. I'm obviously not saying this is 100% the case here, just throwing it out for your consideration. Ops response. You know, I definitely went into this thinking exactly what you just laid out. But I refused to set myself on fire to keep her warm, and the things she said in her message about my partner are irredeemable. She can never be a part of our lives again after what was said, out of respect for me and my partner, even if any part of me wanted to hold out hope for her. I hope this is a wake-up call for her, but it won't be me on the other line.